From the Reporter, the paper of record for Delaware County's towns and villages, this is Off the Record, a quick look at the latest county news. I'm Andrew Kantor, and this week we've got Margaretville's crackdown on unregistered cars, Sidney and the county solving their little snowplowing problem, just a teeny bit of breaking election laws, and more. Let's get to it. Margaretville's got a problem with unregistered cars on people's property. Well, sort of. Trustee Iris Mead brought up the problem, but she seemed mostly concerned about the car in her neighbor's backyard. Mayor John Hubble said there were about 8 of these cars around the village, and it's technically against the law to have an unregistered vehicle on your property for more than 2 weeks. But that's a code enforcement problem, not a trustee's problem. He also told Mead that they can't single out one property owner if they're going to unleash the code enforcement officer, even if that property owner lives right next to a trustee. So they agreed to sic code enforcement officer Hiram Davis on all the unregistered cars in the village. And that actually got me wondering, when does a car stop being a car? Can you take out the engine and call the thing a planter? Does it have to have tires? When is it just like an ugly sculpture and not an unregistered vehicle? No idea. Onward we go. Actually, we'll stay in Margaretville for a bit. The village is licking its chops over the possibility of a $4.5 million grant from New York Forward that it could use for, well, like a whole lot of stuff. Well, a whole lot of stuff, at least on one chunk of Main Street, from the school down to the Open Eye Theater, and maybe a little longer, so it includes the hospital and Fairview Library. And it could really pay for a lot. Upgrade the sidewalk, add benches, maybe a bike lane, revamp the Gallikerche Theater, do something with the burned-out block downtown before someone gives it a name other than the burned-out block downtown. And here's a twist. Stamford is applying for the same grant, so maybe they could coordinate, consolidate their gifts, and pitch the two villages as like bookends to the revitalizations that are already going on in Roxbury and Grand George. They're going to have to decide quickly because the deadline's coming up in a few weeks. And if either village actually gets the grant, then comes the fun part, planning and budgeting and making everybody happy with their decisions. Over in Delhi, the village needs to make some upgrades, big upgrades to its wastewater plant. There's probably state or even federal money to do that, but first it needs an engineering firm to figure out what those upgrades really need to be. And that costs money too. So the village elders are starting down the metaphorical road to riches. They're trying to get a state grant for the planning stage. But here's the thing. The money actually comes from Washington and goes through the state. So there's 2 levels of red tape to get through, and the Washington thing, it's a bit tough with the government shutdown. Anyway, the whole thing is like casting a spell. They need to do everything right, or someone gets turned into a toad, or they don't get the planning grant. Or I guess both. Right now, the first step is looking for an engineering firm to do the actual planning. They can't just hire one of the trustees' cousins or something. There are rules. So they're hoping to get the process going by creating and running an ad soon, and then taking proposals through probably early December. So yeah, the village is planning a process to hire a company to do the planning for the upgrade. And we wonder why kids don't want to go into public service. What else is happening around the county? It's still budget season, so a lot of towns and villages are finishing up their plans for 2026, mostly with some small tax hikes like 1.9% in Andes or Bovina just slipping under the state cap. The county, it took in a lot more sales tax than it expected to, but Budget Director Art Merrill is still looking at possibly raising property taxes more than the state's 2% cap. He didn't say why. The election season is also going on, in case you hadn't noticed, and there are lots of contested elections around the county. Candidates promising this and that, as if they can really make much of a difference beyond, I don't know, changing the hours of the town pool or, adding a no parking zone. But we wish them all luck and remind them to remove their campaign signs when it's all over, please. Nobody likes them. Speaking of elections, just a reminder that if you are a town supervisor, you cannot use the town's official Facebook account to campaign for yourself. Looking at you, Jerry Vernald over in Hancock. To be fair, as soon as someone complained, the post came down and he apologized. And honestly, Facebook's pages and posts and groups, they actually can be confusing. So, no harm, no foul. Great news for Sidney. No, not an Aldi. Stop asking. All right, the quick background. There are a whole lot of vacant properties in the village that are owned by the county since the 2011 flood and the FEMA buyout of all the flooded houses. But this means that when the snow falls, no one clears the sidewalks in front of them. It's been, let's call it a bone of contention between the village and the county. Well, now, finally, it looks like there's a solution. County supervisors voted to spend $60,000 to buy a tractor and snow removal equipment, which they'll give to Sidney, and the village will supply the manpower to clear the sidewalks. Problem solved. And that's it for this week's Off the Record. But you know what to do. There's plenty more in the Reporter, like the No Kings rallies in Delhi and Margaretville, Sidney looking at turning the old ACO building into a flight school, breaking ground on the Delaware Valley Hospital expansion, Delhi looking at some expensive new software to run the village, and more. You just need to pick up the paper, or better yet, subscribe. Head over to the-reporter.net. It's your hometown paper and a lot better than Facebook for getting the news. Until next week, I'm Andrew Kantor. Thanks for being here.